The sirens are already sounding in Moscow's financial district, but you won't hear about it on Russian state television. Behind the Kremlin's polished facade, Putin's economy is crumbling faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Comment below if you knew that Russia's central bank just raised interest rates to a staggering 21%, the highest level in decades. Subscribe now because we're about to expose the hidden economic disaster that threatens to bring down not just Russia, but drag Europe and America into the chaos. In the cold corridors of the Central Bank of Russia, emergency meetings have become a daily routine. The building's marble floors echo with the hurried footsteps of economists carrying folders marked "classified," their faces etched with concern. Outside, Moscow's skyline glitters deceptively, but beneath the surface, the numbers tell a different story. Inflation has reached almost 9% since the beginning of 2024, while the key interest rate of 21% has done little to temper price growth. The surge in prices has created a vicious cycle that even Putin's most trusted advisors can no longer ignore. The smell of desperation permeates the air in government buildings as officials scramble to find solutions to an increasingly impossible equation. Stripping out the booming military sector, the rest of the Russian economy is in a recession. Walk through any Russian city outside of Moscow, and you'll witness the stark reality. Car dealerships stand empty, their showrooms filled with dust and broken dreams. New car sales dropped by nearly 30%, a telling indicator of how ordinary Russian families are tightening their belts while the Kremlin continues its costly war. The war economy has become Putin's addiction, and like any addiction, it requires ever-increasing doses to maintain the high. Military factories work around the clock, their smokestacks belching dark clouds into the Russian sky. Workers toil in shifts that stretch beyond human endurance, producing tanks, missiles, and artillery shells at rates not seen since World War II. But this military boom masks a deeper rot. Russia's economy expanded just 1.4% year-on-year in the first quarter of 2025, its slowest pace in 2 years. The World Bank's forecasts paint an even grimmer picture, predicting sluggish growth amid assessments of underlying productivity stagnation. In the gilded halls of the Kremlin, Putin paces behind closed doors, his advisors presenting him with increasingly dire economic reports. The man who once boasted of Russia's economic strength now faces a reality that no amount of propaganda can disguise. Many Russians appear concerned about the state of the Russian economy and their well-being, and this growing anxiety threatens the very foundation of Putin's power. The banking system, once considered stable, now teeters on the edge of collapse. A banking crisis looms because of growing defaults not yet reflected in official statistics. Behind the scenes, Russian banks are quietly writing off billions in bad loans, hoping to avoid a domino effect that could bring down the entire financial system. But Putin's economic gamble extends far beyond Russia's borders, sending shockwaves across Europe with surgical precision. The continent that once relied heavily on Russian energy now finds itself caught in a web of dependency that proves impossible to untangle overnight. In Brussels, emergency energy meetings have become as common as morning coffee, with officials frantically trying to secure alternative supplies. Gas prices in EU capitals were still 31% higher in January 2025 compared to October 2021. The numbers tell a story of economic warfare conducted through energy pipelines and supply chains. Warsaw residents face the harshest reality, with gas prices showing the sharpest increase at 109%, followed by Lisbon at 77% and Berlin at 72%. European factories, the backbone of the continent's economy, struggle to maintain production schedules as energy costs eat into their profit margins. The industrial heartlands of Germany, once the envy of the world, now operate under the constant threat of energy shortages. Factory workers arrive each morning unsure whether the lights will stay on throughout their shifts. The irony cuts deep. Putin's attempt to weaponize energy has backfired spectacularly. In 2024, the EU imported a record 16.5 million metric tons of LNG from Russia, surpassing the 15.2 million in 2023. Europe's continued dependence on Russian energy reveals the complexity of unwinding decades of economic integration, even as both sides suffer from this toxic relationship. The situation is about to get worse, with gas deliveries that helped fill reserves in 2024 likely unavailable next year. extending the squeeze on prices. European households face a winter of uncertainty, with heating bills that could force families to choose between warmth and food. The human cost of this economic warfare extends far beyond government statistics and into the daily lives of millions. European leaders find themselves trapped in a nightmare scenario. They must maintain solidarity with Ukraine while protecting their own citizens from economic hardship. The delicate balance requires diplomatic finesse that few possess, as public opinion wavers between supporting the right cause and protecting personal financial security. Meanwhile, Russia's agricultural sector faces its own catastrophe. Russia is having its worst harvest in 17 years, further straining an economy that's already seen energy revenue plunge. The golden wheat fields that once symbolized Russian abundance now stand sparse and stunted, victims of climate change, poor management, and the brain drain that has seen agricultural experts flee the country. This agricultural crisis creates a perfect storm. As food production declines and export revenues drop, Russia becomes increasingly dependent on food imports just as international sanctions make such imports more expensive and difficult to obtain. The shelves in Russian supermarkets, once fully stocked, now show gaps that government officials try desperately to explain away. The ripple effects reach across the Atlantic, where America watches with growing concern as Putin's economic desperation makes him increasingly unpredictable. Energy markets fluctuate wildly based on the latest news from the conflict, affecting everything from gasoline prices at American pumps to heating costs in American homes. American intelligence agencies work overtime to track the flow of sanctioned goods and money, playing an endless game of economic whack-a-mole as Putin's regime finds new ways to circumvent restrictions. The complexity of modern financial systems means that every sanction requires careful calibration to avoid unintended consequences for the global economy. Corporate boardrooms across America buzz with contingency planning sessions. Supply chains that seemed secure just years ago now require constant monitoring and backup options. American companies with any exposure to Russian or European markets find themselves navigating an increasingly treacherous landscape where political decisions can wipe out billions in market value overnight. The technology sector faces particular challenges as cyber attacks intensify. Russian hackers, increasingly desperate as economic pressure mounts, target American infrastructure with growing boldness. Power grids, financial systems, and communication networks all face constant probes from adversaries who have nothing left to lose. Agricultural markets across America feel the pressure as global food prices spike due to reduced Russian and Ukrainian exports. American farmers, traditionally beneficiaries of higher commodity prices, now face increased input costs for fertilizer and fuel that offset much of their potential gains. The Federal Reserve watches nervously as inflation pressures from energy and food prices threaten to undermine their carefully managed economic recovery. Interest rate decisions that once seemed straightforward now require complex calculations of how global conflicts might affect domestic prosperity. In the halls of the Pentagon, military planners develop scenarios for what might happen if Putin's economic desperation drives him to even more extreme measures. The intersection of economic warfare and traditional military strategy creates new challenges that require innovative responses from American defense officials. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of this economic warfare is its psychological impact. Markets respond not just to actual events but to the fear of what might happen next. This uncertainty premium gets built into every transaction, from mortgage rates in suburban America to commodity prices in rural communities. The human cost extends beyond statistics and into the daily lives of ordinary people. American families planning retirement find their 401k accounts subject to wild swings based on events half a world away. Small business owners struggle to make investment decisions when the economic landscape changes faster than weather patterns. Energy independence, once a political talking point, becomes a national security imperative as Americans realize how interconnected the global economy has become. The push for renewable energy gains new urgency, not just from environmental concerns, but from the recognition that energy security equals national security. As Putin's economic house of cards continues to collapse, the question becomes not whether it will fall, but how much damage it will cause when it does. The interconnected nature of the modern global economy means that no country, however powerful, can completely insulate itself from the chaos of a major economic collapse. Russia will face an economic recession in 2025, and Putin and the Kremlin will have to determine how to try to address these financial woes. But with limited options and mounting pressure, Putin's choices become increasingly desperate and unpredictable. The final countdown has begun, and the world watches with bated breath as one of the planet's largest economies spirals toward an uncertain fate. The outcome will reshape global power dynamics for generations to come, with consequences that extend far beyond Russia's borders into every corner of the interconnected world economy. What happens next depends not just on Putin's decisions, but on how the international community responds to this unprecedented combination of economic warfare, military conflict, and the breakdown of the post-Cold War order that has governed global relations for decades. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the clock is ticking toward a reckoning that will determine whether the global economy can weather this perfect storm, or whether Putin's final gamble will drag the world into economic chaos from which recovery may take decades. Comment below with your thoughts on how this economic crisis might unfold, and don't forget to subscribe for more analysis of these critical developments that affect us all.